Hello, everyone. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to Time-Saving Cartography Tools in ArcGIS Maps for Adobe 2.0. We are very excited to have all of you here. We have some good stuff lined up for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just a quick reminder for all of you guys, this webinar will be recorded. So if you have to step away, that's okay. You can come back and watch it anytime. So just to start things off, give you guys a little bit about who you're listening to, who we are. My name is Anna Breton. I am a cartographer and product engineer on the Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud team here at Esri. This is my first webinar, so I'm very, very excited to be doing this. And I hope you guys find some very useful information today. And I love mapping because it allows you to represent data in a way that's not just numbers or words. It's a visual experience. And I'm joined here today by my colleague, Sarah Bell.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's nice to see all of you file in, and some of you have commented where you're coming from. I saw places from all over the world. That's really exciting. This webinar, as a lot of you know, has been planned for quite a while, and we're really excited that the day has come. My name is Sarah Bell. I'm a cartographer and a data viz designer and a product engineer on the Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud team, along with Anna and a wonderful group of developers and product engineers that I get to work with. It's really exciting. I want a special shout out to Ray Umali, who organized this whole thing. And I love mapping because it sits at the intersection of science and design. And I think it's a wonderful way for all of us to understand our spatial world while also being creative.
Great. So we're going to go ahead and start with a quick agenda just so you guys know what we will be talking about today. The first part is we're going to explain what Maps for Adobe is. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with who we are and our products, but some of you may not be. So we'll give you a quick overview of that. And then we're going to go into the ArcGIS Pro to Maps for Adobe workflow, where we'll be talking about map layouts, AIX exports, which is an Adobe Illustrator Exchange file, new file type in Pro. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about opening those AIX files in Illustrator. Then in the middle of the webinar, we are going to have some audience participation with a live poll. So stay tuned for that. And then the second half, we're going to talk about creating maps directly in the extension. And we will demonstrate some workflows for you and show you some cartography tools that are available to you. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down. We will hopefully get to as many as we can at the end. So just to start things off, what is ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud? We are an extension into Illustrator and Photoshop that allows you to add geographic content as raster and vector layers into those two programs. And essentially, we allow you to access and design data-driven maps.
And some of you might be wondering how you can get Maps for Adobe. You can download it today. You can go to esri.com/maps-for-adobe, that URL at the top of this slide. When you go there, you'll see this page that we have here. And in the upper right, outlined in that red box, you can click the download button and download the version that's appropriate for your operating system. And on that page, you will find that we have 3 different versions of Maps for Adobe. We have a complimentary free version. And then we have the Plus version, which gives you a lot of the premium features, and the ArcGIS Online version, which gives you the premium features as well. And if you already are an ArcGIS Online organizational account or creator account holder, you already have access to these premium features. All you need to do is download Maps for Adobe, install it, open it up in Illustrator, and you'll be able to log in right into, we'll show you this actually later in the webinar, but you'll be able to just log in directly with your ArcGIS Online account. And there are two different workflows for using ArcGIS Maps for Adobe. You can either make a map directly with the extension inside of Illustrator, or you can create your map using ArcGIS Pro and use the Maps for Adobe extension to open that map in Illustrator. And this new Pro to Illustrator workflow is newly available in our really recent 2.0 release. And it's a huge reason why we wanted to talk with you all today. It's a long-awaited feature. So in our first demo, we're going to be showing you that new Pro to Illustrator workflow, where Anna's going to show you a map that she created using ArcGIS Pro. She'll share some of the best practices for creating a map using Pro for this Pro to Illustrator workflow. We'll also share some links with all the attendees at the end in an email for the documentation for the best practices. And the file type that she will be sharing, she already mentioned, is the AIX format. And it's this new special file type that can be opened using Maps for Adobe. Then she'll toss the mic over to me, and I'll show you how I designed it in Illustrator, where I was able to open it with Maps for Adobe. It's already nicely and neatly organized, so I could get right into the design immediately.
So I am going to pull up ArcGIS Pro here, and we will jump right into the demo. So here we are in Pro. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with this interface and you use it regularly in your day-to-day workflows. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're looking at here in our layout. So here we have a map layout of Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And within our layout, we have a bunch of layout elements at the top here. And we'll go through them quickly. We have a title, just some text, pretty basic in the top left. We also have a scale bar down here in the bottom right. We have a legend in the bottom left as well. And we just have one of our legend elements turned on right now. We could go ahead and turn on other layers. I'm going to keep just this one temperature descriptions layer turned on within my legend. And we also have our north arrow right here. And all these objects were added through ArcGIS Pro through the Insert tab up here. And you can see you have tons of options for various elements you can add into your layout. Dynamic text, you can add images, shapes, your north arrow scale bar, all of those. Map frames, you can go ahead and add multiple map frames if you'd like. But we're going to stick with these 4 elements and call it good. So we have our 4 layout elements, our objects, and now we're going to take a look at our actual map data. So here you can see within our map frame, we have our first layer here, which is a world georeference lines layer. And this is where our Arctic Circle is located. We're going to take a deeper look at the symbology. You can see it symbolized with a dash pattern, some blue color, and then a relatively small point width. So we have some line data there. And then underneath our georeference lines, we have world cities population data. And these are all the yellow dots scattered around our map. And I just went ahead and clipped this data to be within my Norway, Sweden, and Finland countries. And then went ahead and symbolized it with graduated symbols. And for those of you that aren't too familiar with the terminology or with GIS, essentially, we're just symbolizing our cities' populations based on their size. So smaller, less populated cities are smaller dots on the map, and the larger cities are the larger yellow circles. So we have some point data there as well. Next, we have our temperature descriptions layer. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I created this layer. I went ahead and added a world bioclimates layer from the Living Atlas. Also, a side note, all of this data is from the Living Atlas, so available to all of you guys. I went ahead and added the world bioclimates layer, which is originally a raster data set. And then I went and manipulated that data a little bit just so it would work best for our Pro to Illustrator workflow. And what I mean by that is it's important to consider that I will be bringing this map into Illustrator, and Illustrator is a vector-based editing tool. So bringing in raster data sets is not necessarily as useful as bringing in vector data sets. So I went ahead and clipped my world bioclimates data set, resampled it so that it was all manageable within my 3 countries. And then I used a geoprocessing tool within ArcGIS Pro to convert my raster data to vector data. So that once I bring this file into Illustrator, I have more editing capabilities. And then I just went ahead and symbolized all of the different categories with different colors. So just some things to note. It's important to pay attention to how we're representing our data within Pro so that it works best for our Illustrator workflow. So we have those polygons as well. And then underneath we have our country borders. We have some thicker dark stroke for our 3 main countries here. And we also have our world countries layer, which is a slightly thinner stroke. And then our last layer at the bottom here is a multi-directional hillshade layer, which is a raster layer. And we will talk about how rasters are brought into Illustrator in a little bit. But essentially, I just added this to add a little bit more texture to my map, a little bit more dimension. You can see there's some texture over here in Norway and up here. And that's it. That's what we're looking at in this layout. And now, let's say this is good and we want to bring this file into Illustrator. What's the next step? The next step is to go to the Share tab up top. And I'm sure, again, a lot of you are very familiar with this workflow. We go Share, Layout, Export, or Export Layout. And this is where you would go to export to any of your traditional file types. So your JPEGs, your PDFs, TIFFs, whatever it is. And in this panel, we now see this new AIX file type that we've mentioned multiple times before. This is the file type we're going to want to select so that we can bring this layout into Illustrator. Now, a couple notes. The first is this file type is only available in ArcGIS Pro version 2.5 or later. So make sure you're updated, have the latest version of Pro installed. Otherwise, this AIX file type will not be available to you. The second note that I'll mention again once we move into Illustrator is we have to have the ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud version 2.0 or later for this file type to be processed properly in Illustrator. And I'll touch on that again in just a few minutes. So we select our AIX file type, and then you have multiple other options, variables you can change in here. But let's say we want to keep all of those. All you have to do is click Export. I'm not going to export my file right now because I already exported it. And once your file exports, you'll get a little notification down here saying your file is ready to go. And that is it for the Pro part of the workflow. So we're going to go ahead and open up Illustrator. Oops. Pull up Illustrator. In a second. Okay. So here we are in Illustrator. I'm going to show you guys how to open up the extension first, because we have to open up our extension before we can open up our AIX files. So after you download the Maps for Adobe extension through our product page, you're going to go to the Window option up top in Illustrator, go to Extensions, and the ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud option will be there. You're going to go ahead and click it. and you're going to get a login window, which is where you're going to log in. Now here, like we mentioned before, you're going to have to log in using your ArcGIS Online named user account to process these AIX files. So you're going to go ahead and sign in with your ArcGIS Online account. And the extension will load. And I'm just going to touch upon our version number again. So you have to make sure you have version 2.0 or later to process your AIX files. And one way to make sure, if you already have this extension installed, to update to your latest version, you can go ahead and click this button up top in the top right and go check for updates. And it will tell you if you have the latest version of the extension. So if you have the extension installed and have been using it before, you're not sure if you have the latest version, you can go ahead and check for updates up there. So once we're logged in, we're going to open up our AIX file. And it's a pretty simple workflow. You're just going to go File, Open, and browse to where you saved your file in Pro. Now, one thing to note is you can sort by file type, and you can select the ArcGIS Adobe Illustrator Exchange file type to filter out just those file types. And you're going to browse to, I have a lot of AIX files here, browse to where your file is. And I already opened it, but you just click Open, and it will process. So we're going to open up our file. Here it is, processed. And we're going to take a look at the layer structure here. And you can see we have a ready to design layer structure. Everything is organized. We have our layout elements up top, just like they were in Pro. We have our title, our scale bar, legend, north arrow. Within our map frame, again, we have our line data. Here's our Arctic Circle. We also got the prime meridian in there at the end. Let's take a little closer look at our Arctic Circle. You can see here that the dash pattern is preserved. Our color, our width, all of it is preserved and ready to go. And we can also see that our choropleth data and our graduated symbols are sublayers within our Illustrator file. And then, like I mentioned before, I converted my raster data to vector data, so you can see that here. And all of our line data as well. And then we have our raster at the bottom. So I'm going to pass this on to Sarah, and she's going to explain a little bit about what you can do with this once it's in Illustrator.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Now I need to figure out how to share my screen. All right. All righty. Make sure. Now, Anna, if you don't mind, once I share my screen, telling me what you can see.
We see the proper screen. You're good to go.
All right, great. That was awesome. So you can imagine Anna's workflow that she just showed. Her map looked great in Pro. So some people might be using Pro to do a lot of the aesthetic design, but then they want to bring it into Illustrator to kind of finish it off. And in this first scenario, that's what we're doing. So I took Anna's AIX file that she shared with me. I opened it with the latest version of Maps for Adobe, and it opened like this. It was already organized. So as a designer, it made it really easy for me to access the data and design. She mentioned before, if you were just doing the old way before Maps for Adobe and you did it as a PDF, for example, it comes in as this unorganized file. You can design it. However, it's really hard to, like, for example, select all of the circles in the largest category, and maybe you want to resize all of those circles or give them a different color. So in here, for example, I have the city's population graduated symbol up here. I dragged it above the labels because I wanted the country labels to be beneath. But so I was able to globally select all of those immediately without a lot of thought. I didn't have to do the select same appearance or anything to create this sublayer. It was already automatically created for me. And I did resize these symbols. I wanted to make them much bigger than they already were for the purposes of my map. Same thing with these categories right here. I can select all of these polygons at once and give them their own color. And she had mentioned, for those of you familiar with the ArcMap to Illustrator workflow, the image layer that she created. I'm going to show you. I'm going to tweak this a little so you can see it a little better. If you're familiar with the ArcMap to Illustrator workflow, which I know a lot of you on this webinar are, you'll recall that if Anna shared her map with me and she gave that imagery any transparency whatsoever, it would flatten that imagery with the data layers. For example, these polygons would not be vector anymore. They would be cooked into that raster. They would be part of the pixels. So I couldn't further design them to fit my map needs. Also, you might remember that all the images in that previous workflow would be as individual strips, like thin individual images to make up the composite. Well, they are automatically stitched together into this single imagery layer so that I can process this image a lot easier in Photoshop or Illustrator. And so before we move on to our next demo, I'm going to open up Pro and show you a not so pretty map, but there's a reason for this, so hang tight. I know that a lot of you, like I said, have used that ArcMap to AI workflow, where you make the map in ArcMap and you export it as Illustrator. And I was trained in that workflow as well, and I'm very familiar with it. And so as we are currently demoing for you, Maps for Adobe is the answer for switching to this workflow, but instead now using the power of ArcGIS Pro. And a lot of times in a workflow like this, we cartographers use the GIS software, excuse me, to basically compile the map data and perform our GIS analyses for map needs. But we spend little time in the GIS, like I have here, making that map look pretty. I didn't spend any time. I just got my data, did some analysis and reprojections. So I'm definitely one of those people. I love GIS and data viz. I'm a data viz designer, but I also love map design. So in this Pro project, I added all the map data I needed. I reprojected it to the appropriate projection. Excuse me, which for you projection enthusiasts, it's an azimuthal equidistant projection. I changed the central meridian to -100. So why did I do all this? Well, the map subject is the Swainson's thrush, which is this bird that is about the size of a robin. For those of you familiar with a robin, it spends our winter months down in this part of South America. And then in the early spring, it's going to migrate over this part of North America. And then it goes, spends its summer months here, breeding, raising its young. And at the very end of the summer, it will migrate back down to this part of the world. So I needed to use GIS to get this sort of analysis and reprojection done. And then I did what Anna did. I shared it as an AIX file. And let me just show you the final results. So I created this out of that exact map. So I knew I had a plan, right? I needed the data. I needed to use Pro to do some heavy analyses. But then I wanted to make it look different. And you can see it looks very different here by using Illustrator, which is a premium graphic design software. I was kind of inspired by some perhaps maybe cheesy 1970s movie poster, and I decided to bring it up a decade. So I did 80s. Maybe next time I'll do 90s. But yeah, that's basically, I wanted to show you, you don't have to do what Anna did all the time and make your map look great in Pro, which that you have those options available in Pro. But some of you who are more of the Illustrator type, you can do that as well. So I'm going to hand it back over to Anna because we're going to hear from you, the audience, in a poll.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So just in probably a couple seconds here, we're gonna have a poll pop up on your screen. There it is. Okay, so feel free to answer the poll. Question is, do you use ArcMap to Adobe Illustrator, the ArcMap to Adobe Illustrator workflow today? So ArcMap to Adobe, yes or no? And we'll give you guys a couple seconds here to answer. and we will see the results. And it looks like 67% said no and 33% said yes. So some of you are very familiar with the ArcMap workflow. And we have another question coming right up. Second poll question is, do you or someone you collaborate with use one or more of the following applications for map making? And you can select all of the options that apply: Illustrator, Photoshop, After Effects, XD, or it doesn't apply to you. We'll give you guys a couple seconds here to answer. And we're just waiting for the results. And here they are. 71% said Illustrator, 54% said Photoshop, 8% said After Effects, 3% said XD, and 20 of you, this doesn't apply to you. But thank you all for joining anyway. Great. So now we're going to pass it back to Sarah, and she is going to show you some workflows within the extension. So back to you, Sarah.
Cool. All right. Can you still see my Illustrator?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was fun learning a little bit about the audience. Thanks for participating. So remember in the beginning, I said there were two workflows: creating a map in ArcGIS Pro and then opening it with this extension so you can design it further in Illustrator. But we have another workflow. It's creating the map directly inside of Illustrator or Photoshop. And that actually, up until recently, was the primary workflow. It's really awesome, and I'm excited to show you. So like Anna said, you go to the Windows menu, go to extensions. All of the extensions that you have installed will be there. I'm going to select ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud, and it will, of course, because it's a live demo, open up on the wrong screen. So here we go. And you would select the account you're logging into. I'm going to log in with my ArcGIS Online account. I have still not mastered the skill of talking and typing at the same time. So here we go. And if you have an ArcGIS Online account, this will look very familiar to you because you are essentially logging into an instance of ArcGIS Online. And we can do that because of the power of Creative Cloud in the Adobe Creative Cloud suite. So the first time you log in, you'll have the map boards panel. This is the first panel in the map creation workflow. We have this default base map. It's in the Esri vector tile dark gray. We choose it because it's simple. It also matches the default user interface of Illustrator. You can select a different base map if you want to for more detail. I'll select the the streets for this demo. And the map boards panel is where you define the area you want to map. There are two main ways you can do this. You can define it based on data. So you can feed in data from a layer on ArcGIS Online, or you can, if you have a web map that you want to define your extent upon, or from a file. So this is a local file on your disk, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Or you can manually draw your map board, which is the more common way to define your map area, and that's the way I'm going to do it. So let's say you needed to draw a map of an area. You don't know exactly where it is, or maybe your map, you don't want to pan and zoom all the way to that location. So you can type in that location right here. I'm going to do Washington State. I am in Washington State, so I don't really need to search for it. I know where it is, but I just wanted to show you this function. And I close it. And here is Washington State. And now I select the draw tool up here. And it gives me this, you see my cursor has changed to this draw tool icon. And I just draw what we call a map board around the area I want to map. And we call it a map board because it's analogous to an artboard in Illustrator. And I would, Washington State, pop, exclamation point. Whatever name I give it in this map board options dialog is going to be the name of the Illustrator file that I download. And the size and scale is automatically calculated to your zoom level and your map extent, but you can refine that here. For example, you can choose from any one of these preset sizes, a lot of common print sizes, mobile sizes, you know, everything basically that you have in Illustrator. Let's say I wanted to do legal, which is 8.5 wide by 14 high, but I needed to be in landscape, so I just swapped those values. Or I can define the scale itself. So let's say I wanted my scale to be 2.5 million. I can actually manually enter that, or I can choose from any one of these really common zoom levels. So 500, bim, all right. So now I've defined my map board, I gave it a name, and I'm ready to go to the compilation window, which is exactly how it sounds. It's where I compile my map data. Now, before I actually download this map, I can always return to the map boards panel and adjust my map board by moving it around. Let's say I wanted to tuck it in a little here, I'll make it bigger. I can do all of that until I sync my map. Once I've synced my map or downloaded it, the map extent cannot be changed, but you can duplicate your map board right here and create a new one based on that extent. So the very first time you open this extension, the compilation tab won't be open because I use this every day. I already have it open. So how you would get there is you would click this button right here, or we have a duplicate of that button right here. And it brings you to the compilation panel. And this is where you add your data and you can do geoanalyses if you want, and even do some styling. So this map here, this area here, is the map preview area. It's a what you see is what you get version of the map that you will be downloading. So this base map here is not, so let me start by going back over here. If I were to zoom into Seattle here, since this is basically a live web map, the data will update so that, see, I get more city streets now. I might even get buildings if I get close enough. The data on this, there's some building footprints. It updates when I zoom in and it generalizes as I zoom out, which is an appropriate way to do live web mapping. But on the compilation panel, if I were to zoom in on Seattle, it doesn't, because this is showing you a preview of the static map that you will be downloading. And if you zoom into a piece of paper, it's not going to update with data. So that's what we're looking at here. So now I'm going to add content. There are 4 different ways that you can add data to your map or map content. You can add from ArcGIS Online. You can overwrite from a web map on ArcGIS Online. You can add places. I'll show you that in a moment. Or you can add layers from files. So this is a file that exists on your local desk. So this can be a CSV file, a text file, a shape file, which I'll show you in a second, GPX file, and KML and KMZ files. So if I go to add layer from file, I just will find that I found this shape file. So remember, with shape files, you need to zip together all of the associated files with that. I have this rock climbing areas USA file. I click that, and it's a point data set, and it will add all of those points, which is awesome. I could even access the attributes in that data to change the style. Let's say some of them are traditional climbing. For those of you climbers out there, some of them are sport climbing. I could change the style based on that. I could add labels, etc. But this is actually not a map about climbing. So I'm going to remove this layer. This map is going to be a population density map of Washington State. And I'm going to add the universities in this area as well. So I'm going to add layers from ArcGIS Online. So I select that top option. So we have organized the data and the way you search for data in the Add Layers panel that you see here in convenient ways. And let me describe that to you. So my content is the one that it has selected right now. This is all the data on my ArcGIS Online organizational account that I use to log in that I've made available and searchable in this extension. If I can even search my organization for people in my organization who have shared data as well. We also have this Maps for Creative Cloud library. This is where we have curated data from ArcGIS Online, and we've even created new categories that we think are really great for the use of this extension. For example, we have this USGS category or library, and it's all the USGS data that Yeah, sorry, it was on the. I just realized I noticed in the chat that a lot of you are from all over the world, which is really exciting for us. So what USGS is, it's a government organization that curates data for the US. So that's, I guess I should give a little background on what that is. We also have natural earth data, which is a wonderful way to build small scale maps. This is a free and open source data set. And then we have OpenStreet data as well. And we have Living Atlas of the World, which is a wonderful collection of really valuable thematic maps. And then we have the ArcGIS Online at large. So we have, I don't know how many ArcGIS Online users, but it's so many that if I were to type in, say, Washington State here, I would get so much data here that it might be hard to even deal with. So if there is data like the National Park Service unit boundaries, if I were going to use this over and over again, I can bookmark it as my favorites by clicking on this star. And the first layer that I'm going to add to this map is in my favorites. And I'll scroll down to the bottom. I use this layer a lot. It's the World Administrative Divisions. I'll click plus. It's basically the states and provinces of the world. So it has been added to my map. Now, since I'm downloading this to Illustrator, I would probably use Illustrator to get rid of this interesting orange color, but I'm going to show you how you can do that here as well, so you don't have to look at the orange too long. So I'm going to, let me just cancel out and show you what I did. I hover over this ellipse menu and I select change style. I'm just gonna keep it as a single symbol so everything has the same color. I'll give it a fill color of light gray. I'm just kind of trying to neutralize it a little bit, and the outline a little bit darker gray, and click OK. And then click OK again, and there you go. So we have this, because I chose the topographic base map, I have a topographic base map in my map here. It's a raster base map. I don't want it for my final map, so I'm going to delete it. But before I do that, let me talk about the different choices you have in this base map layer. You can choose the vector street map, which is basically a vector base map that does update based on the scale that you're zoomed at. And let me show you really quick. I've created this map here with only using that vector base map. So you can get a really complete, another Washington State based, this is Seattle, Washington. I've created this all using that single base map. So it's really valuable. I use it a lot, but I'm actually going to delete my base map. All right, so the next layer I'm going to add also is in my favorites. So I'm going to add layers, favorites, and it's the USA counties. And this is a US Census Bureau generated layer. So each one of these counties has a bunch of different valuable data associated with it, and I could style it based on those attributes. So remember, this is a Washington State-based map. So I don't need this state over here, which is Idaho, or this state over here. I don't need those counties. This is Oregon. So I'm going to create a filter on this layer. So again, I go to this ellipse menu, go down to filter, and I can create a filter based on any one of the attributes in this layer. I'm going to choose just the state name. So I want to display the features in this layer where the state name is Washington. And then I just click apply filter, and great. So now I only have the counties that are in Washington State. I have all of them, but nothing more. And now remember that this is a population density map, and right now I can't tell where it's populated and where it's not because everything has the same color. So again, I go to this ellipse menu and select change style. And now it's saying show location only. Basically, give everything the same symbol if it's there. I could symbolize based on any one of these. I'm doing population density. So I could do population 2017, which is the most recent year this data has. But that's the raw count, and I want to do a normalized choropleth. So I'm going to choose population per square mile. I just select that, and I automatically get this default choropleth map, which is pretty cool. I could also do a graduated symbol if I wanted to. I'm going to back to choropleth. I really like that it gives me this automated default. I like the color scheme, but I want to change it. a little bit, both of those things. The reason is that I know these counties are all rural, but I know that these counties are a little bit more populated, and these ones are extremely rural. It's probably the most rural part of the state. So I'm going to click Options, and it defaults as a natural breaks classification scheme for all of you data folks. That's a really great classification scheme for this particular map. But if you wanted to choose a different one, you could choose equal interval, manual breaks. You could type in your own if you wanted. I'm going to keep it as natural, and I'm going to capture that nuance over here by increasing the amount of categories to 7. And so when you do natural breaks, it's going to divide the data based on a particular algorithm. I think it was designed by someone with the last name Jenks in the chat. Correct me if I'm wrong. But so 400, it's going to give you these non-round numbers. 469 is not the most round number, so I can select that and type in 500 if I wanted. This 99.6, well, I'm inclined to just round that up to 100, and you get the idea. Again, you can change this color in Illustrator, but why not just choose one of our many awesome color palettes that you have right here? I'm going to choose this red one, flip it so that the largest is the darkest, and click OK. I'll bring down the transparency all the way to 0, so it's fully opaque. And you can see here's where Seattle is. It's definitely looks like the most densely populated, and down here, which borders Portland, Oregon, is also in that category as well. Click OK. And now I need to add labels, which you can do. So I'm going to go here to that same menu, select Manage Labels. And again, I could use any one of the attributes. I'm going to stick with county name, maybe shrink the labels a little bit. And now I have labels. Click OK. I want to show you one more piece of data that I need to add to this map. Remember, I wanted to see universities. So go to Add Content and Add Places. And this is a really exciting feature to me. So if you wanted to add, say, your university or your house, you could type in an address. You can type in coordinates even. Or you can even, for example, I'm just going to type the word university. Again, haven't mastered typing and talking at the same time. And I just search for those, and it's going to be loading those. As it's loading, keep your eye over here on the map. I'm going to hover over some of these, these universities that added. Oh, that's probably under my, oh, let me, hold on. Did I spell that wrong? Yeah, that's more appropriate. Okay, so if I wanted to just add Western Washington University, you can see that it's highlighting on the map, and I could just click plus or add individually the ones that I wanted. So with this plus version or ArcGIS Online version, I can add all of them. I can add all 290. So I'm just going to click that, and automatically you see it created a layer here for the universities. I have all of the points on my map that I want, and I'm ready to download. But first, I want to show you one last thing. I am creating this basically in a web experience to download to Illustrator. So the default projection is Web Mercator. If you're not familiar with Web Mercator, you have all seen it on your smartphones when you're using your maps for navigation on your smartphone. It's probably a Web Mercator projection. So what it does is, for example, this is the 49th parallel, the border between Canada and the United States, and it's going to be really flat in a Web Mercator projection. I know there's a more appropriate projection for this part of the world, so I want to use that for my final map. So I go to the settings in the compilation tab, I click that, and I can search from, I have not counted all of these. My guess is that it's thousands, it's definitely hundreds. So you're probably going to find an appropriate projection for the map you're making if you're into reprojecting your maps and giving it a custom projection. Mine is Washington State Plane. So a lot of states in the United States have their own state plane projection designed specifically for their state or for different parts of their state. This one's designed for the northern half of the state. I'm just going to click that. And it will be reprojecting all of that data on the fly pretty quickly. So now check out that 49th parallel. It has the curve which looks more appropriate for this map. So now my map's ready to download. I would click sync. And before I actually sync it, I get this alert. This is a great alert. It's really cool. It's telling me that when I sync this map for the Plus and the ArcGIS Online versions, you get this premium feature where the information in this compilation window and the map board extent will all be saved in your Illustrator file. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I could download my map, go on a long vacation, come back to work, open that Illustrator file, open Maps for Adobe, and all of this will be remembered. So if I wanted to add more data, I could add more data. If I wanted to create a series of maps over that same extent, I could do that. I already actually synced this map right here. And I haven't done anything to it yet. We have this USA counties layer with all of these nice sub-layers all ready to globally select and restyle if I wanted to. I have the universities label right here, or universities layer right here. So it's all concise and ready to design. But I have one more panel to show you before we move on to wrapping up and some Q&A from you all. So I'm going to go back to the compilations panel and open the third and final panel. So this panel is optional in the workflow, but it's really valuable. Just click this open processes window and I'll get to the processes window here. And we have these different, basically, tools, if you will, that you can run on your map. Either some of them you can run either during or after. So while you sync it or after you've downloaded it, which I'll do in a second. You can add a map scale. You can join lines. So a lot of you might be familiar with an Illustrator. If your rivers are all disjointed segments, you can join them all in a batch. And so they're much easier to style. You can create a map legend as well. So for all you Illustrator users, you're probably familiar with Illustrator libraries. You can have a symbols library, which are basically can be thought of as like points or icons, brushes, which are great for linear symbology in a map, and swatches, which would fill a pattern in what we call closed paths in the design world, or polygons in the GIS world. I'm going to show you the symbols. Go over to this cartography symbols layer real quick to show you what I'm talking about. So I have all these collections of, let's say, they're custom symbols that I always use in a map. I have this sort of 1930s style radio tower that I made that I might want to use. So let's say I had a bunch of different point symbols of the radio tower. I would just put these over that default symbol, delete the default symbol, and then I'd have my radio tower. Or you can use Maps for Adobe to automatically replace your symbols in one click of a button. So I'm going to use this school symbol to replace those university default circles from on my Washington State counties map. So I need to, this is important, it's case sensitive. I need to remember the name of that symbol is school. In fact, I'll just copy it so I get it right. And on the processes panel, I select this, the library where the symbology exists. So I just point to that and it's already there. Let's just do it just to make sure. All right, it's there. And so if I had this selected run on sync, that means when I actually download the map, I would need to rename the layer in the compilation panel to the schools, and it would automatically replace the symbols as I download. Go back to here, and the final step is to rename that layer. Oops, I just lost my. There, schools, I think it was. Excuse me one second, school. Okay, good thing I checked because it wouldn't have worked. Your patience is appreciated. Okay, and now the extension will know which layer to swap out the symbols. So I'm gonna just click replace symbols now that I have it all set up. And I know a lot of you make maps that might have dozens of point layers where you're doing stuff like this all the time. So you can see the time that can be saved by automatically swapping those point symbols with a click of a button rather than dragging them onto the map one by one. I've just saved a ton of time. And the final thing I want to share before I toss it back over to Anna is the map legend tool. This is another thing I'm really excited about. I'm dragging it over here so you can see where the map legend is created. I select the map legend in the processes panel, and how you create a map legend in Maps for Adobe is you need to have visible only the layers that you want in your legend. And that way it knows which ones to add. And then you click create legend. So it's, I mean, this is so fast, mind blown. Watch this. Boom. So I have a legend. I mean, I think it's pretty cool that I just built a legend in Adobe Illustrator. When we introduced this feature, a person on our team named Constantine created this. I was very excited. But we have a legend. I didn't have to manually type the categories. They're already done. I have these ones that I rounded here. And I have the school. You know, if I had dozens of points, it would have added all of those symbols as well. Yeah, so now I can, you know, I've saved a lot of time. I've gotten pretty far in my design in a little bit of time, and I can tweak this map for print. So now I'm going to toss it back over to, oh, wait, I have to share something with you. Hold on. I'm the one with the screen now. Sorry. Go to my thing so Anna has something to look at. Here we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So now we're just going to do a quick wrap up, mention some important notes for all of you guys. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Esri's UC. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's Esri's User Conference, a big conference we have every single year in July. So UC is coming up, and the ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud team will be there, and we will have 2 sessions available to all of you guys attending. An on-demand session, which will be similar to this webinar. So if you want to watch something like this again, feel free to sign up for our on-demand session, which it'll be me and Sarah talking AIX. And we also have a tech talk, which will be me and my coworker Steve. And we'll be talking about a more general introduction to ArcGIS Maps for Adobe Creative Cloud. So feel free to sign up for that as well. Another note, UC is virtual this year. So this might be a good opportunity for those of you who wouldn't normally be able to attend. Usually UC is in San Diego, but now that it's virtual, a lot of you can attend and watch sessions. So feel free to sign up for those. Also, we have a book coming out this fall. Sarah has been working very hard on it, a cartography book, and it's going to be awesome. So keep your eyes open for that. This year we had a mapping competition, and some of our submissions are going to be in that book. So congrats to those people. And also next year we plan on having a map competition as well. So follow us on social media at Maps for Adobe or our personal social media accounts, so you can stay up to date with all the updates, all our events coming up, the book, contests, things like that. And after our Q&A session coming up here, we're going to have a survey that will pop up once we're done with the Q&A. So we love feedback, and we'd love to hear what you guys think about the webinar, suggestions, what you liked, what you didn't like. We love hearing feedback from you guys. So please fill out the survey at the end. We would really, really appreciate it. And with that, we are going to jump into our Q&A session. And
That's Madura. Everybody, we can't hear you that well.
How about now?
that is better.
I'm going to switch my headphones.
Yeah.
How's the audio now?
It works.
Yep, it sounds okay. We can work with it.
Okay, so I'll go over some of the questions, and there was a lot of activity in the chat. So if you have a question that we haven't answered in the Q&A, you can, I just want to let everyone know that you can reach out to us also through our GeoNet website on our GeoNet community and ask your questions, and we'll be happy to answer your questions there as well. I'm going to go through some of the questions for you, Sarah and Anna, so maybe you can answer. I'll start from the beginning of the presentation. There was a lot of excitement about the ArcGIS, the map in ArcGIS Pro, and about the use of the font and the style in the ArcGIS Pro map. So maybe Anna, could you quickly describe how the font that you use in your in the countries, and also the tool that you use to convert your raster data to vector data?
Yep. So for fonts, there are tons of options. You can go ahead and use custom fonts within ArcGIS Pro, and then you can embed those fonts so that when you send your files to other people, they can also have access to those custom fonts. So I just use a custom font within Pro, and all you have to do is download that font onto your machine. And that's how I got the country font for, I'm assuming the question was for the main country names. And also you can go ahead, you don't have to do your font editing within Pro. Some people prefer to do it once you're in Illustrator. So you can go ahead and export your map without custom fonts in Pro, and then go ahead and edit all of that once you're in Illustrator. All the text is editable text. So whichever workflow works best for you or you're most comfortable with, you have those options for customizing. The second question was about converting my raster data set to vector. And I mentioned that I did that because Illustrator is a vector editing tool. So I wanted to switch my rasters to vector within Pro. And this is a geoprocessing tool that's built inside of ArcGIS Pro. So you can go to the geoprocessing tools panel, and there are tons of different options in there for converting your data from one data set to another. One of them is converting raster to polygons. So I went ahead and used that tool to change my raster into vector polygons. And I think that answered the questions.
Yeah, I hope that answered the questions. Again, you know, if we'll try and get to as many questions as we can here, but you know, if we don't get through all of them, please reach out to us on our community page. Also related to the Pro workflow, there was a question about if there are any recommendations for how to set up your export setting for your resolutions to get a good quality map in your AIX. So maybe Anna or Sarah, if either one of you want to take that question.
Yeah, so Anna, you can take that. Or I guess I can open Pro, but since I'm showing my screen, do you want to?
Yeah, that'd be great. If we could pull up Pro, that'd be awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't really mess with any of the Pro settings in my export panel, but there are tons of different options in there. If you have Pro, you can go and explore those options and find out what works best for you. There are options for image compression. Setting those higher will obviously would help. Vector resolution as well. You can change your DPIs. That is another way to create more higher resolution data. What's the option under that? Oh, raster resolution, I believe we have under there as well. You can obviously do your set it best, fast, or normal. And then, so there are tons of options in there for you to kind of play around, and it depends what your data looks like and what type of data you have. but going ahead and messing with those is probably would be my suggestion, and find out which settings work best for your data. And then I also mentioned down the embed under fonts there in the export panel, kind of bringing it back to the question earlier. There's the embed fonts option. So if you're exporting with a custom font, make sure you have that selected. Yeah.
Good question.
Did you have anything to add, Sarah? Can I move to the next question?
No, I think Anna covered it. That was great. And it was a great question too. And it looks like we have time for a few more questions before we wrap up. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me pass over a couple of questions that came about the usage in the extension. So there was a question about how do you decide the map size and the resolution when you're trying to draw a map in the map board.
Okay, so the question, I know the audio is a little rough. So the question is, how do you decide the map size in Adobe Illustrator in the extension when you're defining it, or Photoshop for a lot of people already know, a lot of map designers are going to know like where their map is going to fit in maybe a website or the print. So that's how a lot of people decide. And then if you want to decide a scale, let me just show you this handy little thing before. If I go to this map board, I'll select the one I haven't downloaded yet, so I can show you the properties. In this scale, so if you weren't familiar with scales, what 288,000 means, it gives you a little description in front of that scale. So the metropolitan area. You can even go down to the neighborhood area if you wanted to. So that would be something more like a 1 to 10,000. And what that means is every spatial unit, for example, 1 centimeter, is going to be 10,000 centimeters. So, and this is sort of a complex thing, but if I were to increase the scale or zoom into the Earth, it's going to increase the size of my map board unless I change the extent. But there's a lot of thought that goes into if you know the place that you want to map, you will have to decide the size and the scale based on your particular map. There's a lot of individual cartography decisions that go into defining the map scale and the map size. But if you wanted a little bit of a hint on what scale to choose, you get these little hints in front of the scale itself. And then again, like I said, you can further refine it to a particular one, like I did here with the 2.5 million scale.
I hope that answers the question. Let's take one more question for the extension, and then I also have one question that I'd like to go back to for the Pro experience. Does that sound good to you, Anna and Sarah?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. So let's talk about in the extension, when would you style things in the extension versus styling things in Illustrator? So there was a comment about like we're working in Illustrator, but we're not really doing a lot of Illustrator things. So can you perhaps highlight that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So like I said, love Adobe Illustrator styling in there. The reason why you might want to, let me even go to this one, for example. I don't have it open. Yeah, this one is a great example, actually. So this was made using this base map that I was talking about, and basically that rock climbing areas point data set that I showed earlier that I deleted from my map. So it's a drive time analysis from the geocentroid of the city of Vancouver, British Columbia. And I was able to do that using some styling tools and basically geoprocessing tools in the extension that you can't do inside of Illustrator itself. You have to use the extension. And that's part of the reason you might want to use these options here, is you want to do some further geoanalysis available as premium features for the Plus and GIS users. Why you might want to change this style, like in a choropleth map, is that, oops, wrong one, is that you have access to, like I previously mentioned, all of these empirically proven effective choropleth color palettes. So that's one reason why you might want to style there. I personally don't think you need to go do the full map design, because quite frankly, that's why you're pulling it into Illustrator. But another reason you might want to do it again is because in that counties, like I showed you before, you have access to like unique symbols. You can do graduated symbols, and you know, this is something you just can't do in Illustrator itself. Want to make those larger here. Why wait till I download when I can do it right here in the extension? Make these smaller here, and then yeah. So that's a great question, because if you love using Illustrator like I do, you're familiar with all of the power of the design. But there's sometimes when design is data visualization, and when you're able to access the data to also design the map, you can create something that's more powerful. So that's why you might want to use the extension to do some of your design.
Okay, and this will be the last question, is what is the, if we change the graphics in Illustrator, can those changes go back into GIS?
That is not, it doesn't go back. So all of those point symbols that I added at the end, the university symbols, it's not going to go back to the extension. Or if I change the choropleth colors in Illustrator, that won't be remembered in the compilation panel. It's a really good question. I don't know if Madura, you or Anna want to add any more nuance to that answer.
Maybe I'll go ahead and add a little bit just background to it, is that think about the Illustrator extension as a way to collect your map shapes as assets that you can style in Illustrator. Now let's say for some reason that data was to be updated because maybe new shapes were added, new points were added, either in ArcGIS Online or the class that you were working with locally in ArcGIS Pro. The workflow you would use is to re-export that map into AIX or resync that layer back into the extension using, I'm sorry, I guess my audio is still losing that. But I was just adding to that workflow where the data changes in your GIS, then you would resync the map in the extension. And one of the nice things about the extension is using your ArcGIS Online account or your Plus account, then the map extent and the map board is remembered when you resync things, everything lines up.
All right, those were all great questions. Thanks for asking. And we probably didn't have time to get to all of them, so please remember to follow us, contact us. We want to get to all your questions, so please reach out to us so that we can make sure to get to them all. This has been really fun. I just want to thank you all again for coming. I know a lot of people had to step off because we've gone over, but we also have the survey. I want to remind you, so stick around for that.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We love feedback and will gladly answer any of your questions. So thank you all for coming again, and hopefully we'll see you at UC.